Hello and welcome to this 10th episode of the Secret Cave podcast. This week we've got on Paul Alborough, who's probably best known for playing the character of Professsor Elemental. We recorded this conversation about a week ago, but we've gotten a bit clogged up with guests and we'd like to keep a weekly schedule, so that's why things coming out, despite the fact that we've got like 3 podcasts recorded and waiting to come out at the moment. Anyway, Professsor Elemental is an awesome British rapper who at first was known for trailblazing the small genre of chap hop, which is kind of like a steampunky Victorian type approach to hip hop with a comedic edge. And he started out with tracks like Cup of Brown Joy and Fighting Trousers, which brought him some viral fame. But since he's gone on to develop the character in some really interesting ways, particularly on albums like ApeQuest, where he's really explored it to its full depths and brought in like sci-fi and made it this huge concept album. He's also done plenty of work just as himself, where he proves himself to be a fantastic lyricist time and time again. I really am a big fan of his work, and I felt like I hit it off really nicely with him, so it was so fantastic to speak to Paul. But let's go ahead and listen to it.
Hello.
Hello, Paul. How are we doing
today?
Can
you hear me? That's the question.
Yes, I can, yeah.
Yeah, good, mate. It was really the best days for this kind of work I've found are ones where I've got a nice variety of tasks. So I've had loads of boring shit to do. But I've balanced it up with some nice sort of songwriting in between and little small tasks. So that's been nice. What do you do when you're not doing all this stuff?
Well, to be honest, I'm predominantly a writer and musician, really. So I play bass for wedding bands and things like that. So.
Oh, nice. Oh, you know how it goes then. That's cool.
Yeah. But this is my love project and all that stuff.
Nice. Yeah, I heard your interview. I just sort of stumbled across it yesterday, but I heard your interview with the bloke who does Charlie Chuck.
Yeah. That was insane. Came out of nowhere, really.
Really?
It's all of these interviews, really. I just send a tweet, and it's amazing the people who agree. Just from a tweet.
Yeah, most people are up for this sort of thing, aren't they? To a certain level, obviously. I'm sure there are once you get to proper famous people, then you don't. But most people are, yeah, I've got nothing else going on. That'd be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's been a lot of fun. I've found it to just be this like casual release for a lot of creative people.
Yeah, that's true. Who's been your favourite person you've had on?
Oof, you see, that's a tough question, man, because I don't want to offend anybody else. That's we've had.
No, but just like from a personal point of view, who did you come away from going? That was the shit, man. I love doing that one.
Well, to be perfectly honest, just a couple of weeks ago, I spoke to Eggsy, one of the main guys from God Looking Chain.
Oh, nice.
I really enjoyed that because I kind of grew up listening to their first couple of albums.
Yeah, they do well as well. I'm impressed with the way that they sort of continue to maintain it, because it's been a good few years they've been around, isn't it? They've long past the sort of sell-by date, and they still rock festivals and do a lot of good new tunes all the time.
Well, that's it. It surprised me because I'd only really listened to their first album back when I was like 14, and when I was researching ready for the interview, I was listening to this catalogue of like 12 albums they've got now, and it's surprisingly really good actually. I was taken aback by how good it is.
Yeah, someone told me that they've got a new song. Whose Draw Is This? That I haven't heard it, but they were like, "Oh, you're right. You're right up your."
I've got to say that's actually one of my favourites, weirdly enough. And yeah, it does say it's Paul's draw, so.
Is it really that perfect?
Yeah. But yeah, that's a good start, really. Kind of like British comedy type stuff, because that's how we connected up at first, I think, isn't it? I think I sent you my article on British comedy.
Oh yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, because that was when we first got in touch properly, and when I think you might be up for an interview. So.
And there's the amount of detail and research that you put into that as well. It's really easy to knock out, I don't know, sort of fanish articles and blog posts that are kind of a bit sort of broad or even a bit too specific about one thing that the person likes and doesn't cover a lot of stuff. But there was just an amount of detail in there that I found really fascinating. It was great from a comedy nerd point of view.
Well, that's it. I'm a huge comedy nerd myself. Like, I always saw myself as like this Renaissance guy who's into all kinds of stuff. But then I turn around, look at my DVD collection, and I realise it's 90% British comedy. And it's like,
yeah,
it can't be that varied then.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, we like to think we've got really broad taste, but actually, there's normally quite specific. I
Yeah.
tell you something that's really sort of going off the track for a second, but something that I saw recently that no one else seemed to watch, and I told all my mates, and no one watched it, but you'll probably love it. Do you watch Camping with
No.
Julia? Oh, the woman who does Hunderby and with
Right.
her last time, what's Julia Thingamajiggy? It was on Sky. I'll have to. I found one link.
It wasn't
to it
the
online.
Julia who did Nighty Night, was it?
Yeah, it's
Right.
written directed by her. It's the best fucking comedy I've seen in about 5 years. It was so good.
Oh, I'm going to need to check it out.
Thing. Oh mate, honestly, you'll absolutely love it. Really dark. It's got one of the guys from League of Gentlemen, a couple of people from Hunderby in it.
Well,
And,
League of Gentlemen's one of my favourites, so.
oh yeah, it's really really good. It's
I'll
one of those
definitely
things that
look
I've told a
into
few
that.
people about. They go, oh yeah, I'll see that, and then I think, oh, you're not going to watch it. It's too good to be ignored.
Well, I definitely will, because to be perfectly honest, I always need things to write about as well. So
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
that gives me an excuse. But if there's someone from League of Gentlemen in it, then that's a good start for me. Because have you been watching much of Inside Number 9?
Yeah, they were good, weren't they? Really
Yeah,
good.
yeah. It's only recently I've seen it since it's come on Netflix, and it's blown me away.
Oh, even the ones that aren't funny are very good stories as well.
Exactly.
There's a couple. Inevitably, there's always a couple that dip slightly, and there's a couple that didn't really have any comedy in them, but they're sort of still well observed horror stories. They're great.
Yeah. And this is kind of exactly what I wanted. I thought we could start out with a little chat about British comedy, because it's clearly something we're both into.
Oh yeah, that's good. Good idea. Lovely.
And I was interested in like what some of the formative British comedies are, because I've heard you talk about how important comedy is to the Professor Elemental thing.
Yeah. Are we on? Is this it? Are we in the podcast now? Is this happening? Have we been in the podcast all along?
Yes,
Like
kind
the
of.
Matrix.
I mean, like this, it's kind of a casual thing, so there'll probably be a couple of chops here and there from things we've said, but yeah, it's quite casual, so don't worry about it.
Okay, cool. Right, we're in it. It's happening.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. First, early stuff was. I think Blackadder was a huge influence because it's something I used to watch with my dad,
Right.
and it was where I first got that real love of words, like and Fry and Laurie as well. Their TV series. It was all very verbal comedy. It was all very verbally dexterous and played on the ridiculousness of language,
Yeah.
and that really tickled my fancy. I just thought that was the absolute business. And it was also sort of late 80s, early 90s where stand-up would start coming on TV, and you'd have people like Alexis Sale or even our sort of short-lived version of Saturday Night Live had a few different comedians and impressionists and stuff, and that left a big impact on me because it was quite, it was all quite anarchic in the early 90s. They were getting away with an awful lot of stuff.
That's very true, yeah.
And I think the Professor was definitely born out of a kind of a yearning to do stand-up comedy mixed with my sort of love of hip-hop, and then finding myself sort of slightly on the outside of hip-hop, and then the comedy stuff managed to make everything marry up really nicely. It was the glue that held it all together.
But would you say that the hip-hop came first for you?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, like a lot of middle-class white boys living in the countryside in England, hip-hop was like a really safe way to rebel.
Yeah.
It was like you could rebel without actually doing anything naughty other than playing a song that had swearing in it.
Yeah, it's interesting, these commonalities, because as I've been growing up, I think we're quite similar in that I loved hip-hop growing up and I loved British comedy. They're two cornerstones for me, but they're really quite different things.
Yeah, absolutely. They've got similarities in their kind of anarchic. You can get away with anything in either thing. Like a good hip hop MC doesn't give a monkeys about what he says. He'll say anything, and a good comedian's the same. So there's definitely sort of good similarities you can draw between them, but they are, from their sort of cultural perspective, they're wildly different. Definitely.
Well, that's an interesting connection you've made there, though.
Yeah, I think there's something about going against the grain and not obeying the rules.
Yeah, definitely.
In different ways, it definitely comes up.
But I've also heard you say about how you wanted to bring some of the sunshine back into hip hop, so it's not about the aggression then.
Yeah, and I think when I first sort of got into it, I was desperately keen to be an MC, but I sort of started off with a lot of weird and funny tales about early days rapping when I lived in London,
Right.
and there was a rapper called, he's still going, called Manage, who sort of took me under his wing and sort of introduced me to loads of sort of big London names. And I'd try my hardest to be all like, oh yeah, I've had it up to here, I'll take your mum from the rear, and all this, wow, really cross. And my, friends who knew me before rapping were just like, what are you talking about, Paul? You couldn't scrape in a food fight. Just like, this is ridiculous. So I and I got booed off stage a few times for being quite obviously a bit fraudulent when it comes to doing battle rhymes and things. And then, I think the sort of hip hop that I grew up on, I suddenly realised there wasn't really all that much of it. Even the sort of really silly stuff that now you look back and go, oh, that was just shit. The stuff like the Fresh Prince, or some of the better stuff like Souls of Mischief and Tribe Called Quest. There was a lot of silliness in there and a lot of humour, and that somehow got lost along the way. So it's a nice. I was like, oh, there we go. There's where I can do hip hop, and without having to pretend to be something else, and being kind of true to proper hip hop culture as well.
You're right, actually. I'm glad because you're noticing a lot of things that I'm feeling like I should have thought about before. But for me, comedy has actually been a big part of hip hop as I've listened to it. Like sometimes things are said that's so ridiculous that it must be comedy.
Exactly. Even sometimes in the serious songs, you have a lyric that's just like, what is that about? What are you talking about? Or they get something slightly wrong and it becomes hilarious.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of. But even someone like Ice-T, like most of his best songs were really funny. They weren't particularly sort of complicated, but even just like silly blue Bernard Manning style humor on them. And a lot of the punchlines, like good punchline rappers, people like Self-Titled or whatever, they're mostly just doing really bad puns all the time. Dad jokes, if you decode it slightly. Right. Most good punchlines are just really shit puns.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah.
So do you have any kind of resentment for the word novelty then?
I just I don't resent it, because you have to go with whatever you get. But yeah, I suppose so. No one probably wants to be seen as a novelty act, do they?
No.
I mean, no, it's not like I need people to take me seriously. But novelty suggests that it's like, oh, look at that funny fellow with his cup of tea. Anyway, what's next? And you want to kind of like carve out a little bit of longevity. I think that's why I ended up doing stuff with the Professor outside of just steampunk and tea and monkeys and trousers, and like broadening lots of the stuff I talk about being about nerd culture and being about sort of slightly on the outside of being popular and that kind of stuff. Yeah. Being able to harness the kind of people that I consider to be in my tribe, and that definitely helped, I think, give him a little bit more longevity and to broaden the breadth of what I can talk about on stage as well.
That was exactly something I wanted to talk about, actually, because that evolution I really noticed going through your stuff. How obviously in the first couple of albums it's very Victorian based and it's set in this one world, but then by the time ApeQuest comes along, we're in Hitchhiker's territory.
Yeah, I'm just all over the place by then.
Oh, I love ApeQuest, man. I just wanted to say, it's a fantastic piece of work.
That's probably my favourite thing I've ever done. For all of the music, and you're a musician, you know how it goes when you make stuff, and half the time you're like, well, I mean, it's all right, I could have done this or that. Yeah. That was one of those few times I was like, nope, that's what I wanted it to look like, and now it does, hooray.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's nice to have an opportunity. Like, hip hop's too good to kind of talk about any one thing. You want to be able to talk about anything that pops into your head. And right. I hate the idea of doing cover versions or talking too much about stuff I've already talked about, like, oh, it's another song about tea. Oh, have you seen the monkey? Like, that's a great little novelty thing to do, but you want to keep kind of constantly innovating and doing something new, or otherwise, what's the point?
That's another great thing I heard you talk about in another interview, was how you actually didn't enjoy this little spout of fame that you once had, and that you enjoy being obscure.
I don't know if that's. Maybe I don't know what I was on that day, but yeah, I definitely don't like the idea of.
I didn't mean that to sound offensive, incidentally.
No, not at all. I was just more. I think, yeah, definitely the idea of becoming mainstream or getting big in some way that gets you really noticed.
Well, what I wanted to link that to was the idea of you could have just kept pumping out songs about tea, and you would have probably racked up the views on YouTube. And
that's true, actually.
No, but you've taken this approach of trying to develop the character, and I was actually amazed at how well you'd done it, to be honest.
Oh, thank you. Well, it definitely, what I've realised what the Professors becomes, people sometimes go, oh, are you going to do another character? And I always think of, Steve Coogan or someone who's come up with loads of other characters, but keeps having to go back to Alan Partridge. And I
Yeah,
know that
yeah,
would be a bit like me as well. I'd have some wacky other guy, and people are going, nah, it's not good. But the Professor's really useful because I have an idea for like a horror story or a comic I want to write. He's like a lens that I can focus it all through. So I'm not having to just write random stuff without any particular audience, or doodle for ages without ever getting it out.
yeah.
There's always an audience, and there's always something I can put it through. So if I do write horror stories, if I just tip the angle slightly and direct it through the lens of the Professor, then there's people who read it, and it makes it a lot easier for me to focus and to create it as well.
So
That
I was
makes
gonna,
sense.
no, totally. I was gonna say, do you feel like somehow, as you've gone along with it, that the lines started to blur between Paul and Elemental?
Definitely. There was a really good. I don't remember if it was in a book I read or stand-up comedy or something, but I think it was Marv had a quote where he said, the thing with comedians who's got character, you've got like who are a particular character, the mask burns the face. I was like,
Right.
ooh, that's really grim and true.
Yeah,
Whether
yeah.
it's Al Murray, the pub landlord, or whoever else, you end up getting really mixed up with it. But the Professor is. He's basically me when I'm a bit pissed. He's all the parts of me, or a lot of parts of me that I'm not that proud of, like really
Right.
sort of self-obsessed and a bit self-important, but also quite optimistic and enthusiastic about everything. So it's kind of like a bit like any comedian. You sort of heighten certain parts of your personality and project them out into the world and
Oh,
hope
of
for the
course.
best.
But at the same time, because I had this with Eggsy from Gold Looking Chain as well, in that we concentrated on the comedy a little bit with him, and then
Yeah.
I listened more to their stuff afterwards, and I was like, holy shit, they're actually incredible rappers. And that was something that I had from your work as well. And that I didn't want to be all about the comedy because, you're technically a fucking good rapper, man.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. Well, it's because of coming up with all of these incredible other MCs that made you you couldn't dick about too much. So there's Dr. Syntax is a UK MC that I'm in a crew with, and people like Disraeli, another guy called Teej, and a guy called John Clark, and they're not people who listen to this podcast will have necessarily heard of, but they're worth seeking out on YouTube and the like because when we were doing it in Brighton, we were all doing it together. Some of them were very intricate and very technical about it, particularly John Clark. He's very imaginative, but he's just the most technical MC. So you sort of have to raise your game if you're going to be rapping with people like that, or that's when you would become a novelty, I think. And the same, that's the secret probably with Goldie Looking Chain. It's if you make sort of wacky music, that'll only take you so far. But if you make good music that's about ridiculous things, then that's, I think, a bit of a secret to keeping it going.
Yeah, definitely. And an appeal to both of you, and I'm not just trying to make a comparison, it just so happens that two podcasts in a row have featured British hip hop
Silly rappers.
artists. Yeah. And I need to try and remember where I was going with that, and I think I've just got it. Is that what I enjoy about the music of you two is that I love hip hop, but there is nothing out there talking about the things that you talk about, which is actually things I relate to, as comedic as it is.
It's a shame as well, isn't it? You'd think there'd be more people who would be up for that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
Want to dick
totally.
about it.
Totally. I mean, in your sense, like the whole chap styling of it, like as a British guy, it's something that I do relate to, and I pick up the Blackadder influence as well, which I grew up watching at my nana's house when I was like 6 years old.
Awesome.
So I get this really warm feeling from it that I think does transcend comedy.
Oh, that's a really nice way to put it. Actually, that's lovely, and that's very much exactly how I would actually want it to be perceived. Because you do there is problems, and not so much now actually, because I've culled a lot of my audience by being horrible to certain groups of people. But
Really?
there's a real problem with not specifically, but on stage particularly. But after things like Brexit, or a couple of years
Uh,
ago when Gove came out that he said he was a fan of my music and had to kind of disparage anybody who liked him liking me.
but
So
was
there's
he a fan of your music though, or had he just
he
been
did. He
told to
said
say that?
well, no, I reckon he probably was because he's a bit of a weirdo.
Yeah,
But
that's
he
true.
he's not, it's that thing of like, well, no, you're not invited. You've stolen everything else from us, you Tory bastard. You're not in this as well. You're certainly, I'm not your gateway into hip hop. Piss off. Wow. And it made me, and also getting, I don't know, I've been booked for the odd gig where I was just suddenly surrounded by, I don't know, I did a banker's wedding in Sweden a few years ago, and I was like, oh, I don't really belong here, and I don't want to do things like this. So I spend a lot of time doing bits of stand-up on stage, often with a bit of a left-wing angle, partly to alienate certain members of the crowd. So they go, oh, I thought he was this, but he's not that, or he's that, or I don't like that.
Because you've had the Brexit jacket as well recently, haven't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. When Brexit happened, I had quite a few Brexit people like posting, going, "Oh, this is what we need: British Brexit. I'm British." And I had this "I'm British" song, and I hated it, so I rewrote it as a sort of anti-fascist song, and put it out with all the proceeds going to a refugee charity, and name-checked loads of really racist organisations in it.
Right.
And apologise for them at the end, so I could then get in touch with, Britain First or whatever, and say, congratulations, thanks to you being in my song, you've helped raise over £1,000 for refugees. Just doing whatever you can, basically, to cultivate the sort of people you want to hang out with in your audience.
Yeah, exactly. Because when I was like first getting into Professsor Elemental and listening to it all, one of the things I was worried about was like a patriotism angle to it, because I'm leftist yourself, so like I have this that apologetic discomfort with the Union Jack and all of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a really weird relationship, and my sort of seeing things through the Professor is tricky as well, because probably the Professor would be a bit more like, oh, England and God save the Queen and that kind of stuff. Whereas I'm, the same. I'm pretty on the left side of things. So finding that balance has been interesting, but it's actually mellowed my opinions, and it has made me more appreciative of things that I might otherwise have railed at as well in the past. I don't know whether it's the royal family or finding things that I'm genuinely proud of about being British, rather than going, oh, it's just shit here and I hate the Tories. Finding things to be positive about has been quite interesting.
Do you know? Well, I'm sure you do. The songwriter Billy Bragg.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this brilliant book he wrote called The Progressive Patriot, which is all about exactly what you've just been saying, which is like finding ways.
Oh, I'm totally going to get that. That's a great idea. I'm definitely that.
I thought that might be up your street.
Yes. Oh no, that's exactly it. I'm fascinated by that. And also, when it comes to being British and being patriotic about stuff, it tends to be the things that we can be comfortable about being patriotic about aren't the sort of history or the big royal family. It's the small things, isn't it? It's all the politeness and sarcasm and a tiny garden gnome and crumble and badgers. It's the tiny things that we do really well, the middle of the road, quite mundane things that I think they're what food
out for hedgehogs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the perfect example. Small, sort of tiny act of kindness and ridiculousness. I find that travelling around the country as well. Like I go out of my way if I can to stay in sort of slightly tumble down bed and breakfast rather than just endless travel lodges, because you just get a lovely sense of all of the best and worst bits about Britain. You get some characters and stories and bad breakfasts and scruffy rooms and stuff. That's what I like.
Exactly, and this is what I liked about ApeQuest and what I'm talking about with the relation stuff. That yes, you're going on this quest through space and time and all of that, but it's very British and it's got all of this ordinary stuff in there. And I did wonder how conscious that was, or whether it's just comfortable for you, whether it's just something you fall into.
I think I do fall into it naturally, but it is a conscious effort as well. And I think, particularly with the Professor, I'm just constantly steering him away from being too much of a sort of colonial historical explorer, because I do still get the odd American on Twitter who's just going, right, that's racist to even wear a hat like that, right? And anti-white. So I think there is a conscious element where I do sort of steer away from those kind of things where possible, just to kind of really lay my cards on the table. But then that has the nice effect, because it means that you're showing off the bits of the country or your psyche that you actually, that are a bit more interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if you'd thought about this, because what I'd noticed as a listener and I wanted to know if this was conscious or not, is that it felt like on your first couple of albums that it was uh, Professor Elemental in his home in the Victorian times. Whereas as things have evolved, it's almost like you've taken the character and brought him into modern times, and now you're letting him react to things around him.
That's absolutely spot on. It was just a bit too limiting. What I've realised with him now, I've taken him out of his little Victorian village. No, let me start that again. Skip all of what I was just saying, and I'll try and make sense this time.
This is what editing's for.
So yeah, he has burst out into modern times and reacting to things that are going on. But what I'm trying to do this year is to build a little supporting cast for him, just to broaden his world out. And I imagine him living in a slightly timeless version of Britain, like Wallace and Gromit or a Carry On film.
Yeah.
They're just archetypal Britain. They're not particularly Victorian, and they're not completely modern either, because they're a little bit old-fashioned. They're all the nicest, coziest bits of Britain. That's where I sort of imagine him being.
Yeah, so like visiting your grandma's house.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he's supposed to be, where he lives.
Yeah.
So with one of the things that I haven't really done much with yet, but we wrote and recorded 4 half-hour episodes of a comedy radio show with hardly any music in, and got some amazing comic actors to play different parts. And so now he's got a rival and a girlfriend, and there's a superhero and a policeman who he doesn't like, and all that kind of stuff. So just seeing what I could do to build up the surrounding cast and give him some other things to react against, other than just Jeffrey in a house.
Yeah.
I'll be really interested to see what you think of that when it's all done. I'm just getting the sound effects added to it now, but yeah, that's the Professor doing proper comedy, just without any music. Let's see if we can actually turn it into actual comedy.
Right, I'm interested in that, because that kind of thing was teased a little bit on. I hope it's the latest record, and I haven't missed anything. The Amazing Friends one.
Yeah, exactly that. It was the Amazing Friends was a kind of in betweeny one, and the next one is. I'm gonna go for a couple of more concept-y albums, just because they're quite fun to do. They make you work a bit harder trying to work everything into a concept, and I think the results are a bit better for it as well. So yeah, we shall see. We'll see how it all comes out. But I'll make sure I give you a copy to listen to and check over before I send it out into the world.
Yeah, you get my approval first.
I need a good comedy nerd stamp of approval.
Yeah,
that's important to me.
Well, no, I'll definitely look forward to that, because I remember I really do like the cover to the Amazing Friends thing, where it had the kind of expanded cast thing going on there, and I found myself wanting to be like, well, who is this? Who is that? And
I should have done a little map actually of who they were, because most of them appear on the album. Most of the people on the front of that. There's a couple that are friends or like my other half's on there as a superhero, but nearly all of them are DJs and MCs and producers that appear on the album in one way or another. But yeah, the guy who drew that's another lovely thing, and I don't know if you find it yourself with your own music, but in the wonderful world that we live in, the capacity for collaboration is just so exciting and huge. Like hooking up with an artist to do the cover for an album, or like recently I said, I might build a new website with loads of different artsy things on it, and the volume of people that came to me and said, I can do this, or I'll edit that for you, or I'll provide the artwork. It just that is something I absolutely love about it, the constant collaborations and the different shapes that those collaborations take. What does that sentence mean? I don't know, sorry, I'm just talking.
Well, I understand you, because I was going to say, like, I was one of these guys who was completely cynical about Twitter for years and years, and I only joined like last year, and I've found that this fucking amazing community that I was totally cynical about for years. You can connect with amazing people like yourself.
It's hilarious, isn't it? And it's also really people who aren't on Twitter tend to kind of look at me with a raised eyebrow, but it's sort of less indulgent than something like Facebook. No one can go on there and moan how everyone's using me, or I'm just really depressed, I wish someone would give me some love. Twitter is fast and cynical and funny. It's like, particularly when you start culling people and like if someone's a dick, just get rid of them. So Twitter only looks like what you want it to look like. Right. So you're only surrounded by funny, like-minded people. I think then it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I did actually make a conscious decision to follow the Tories the other day, just because I felt like I had to. Because I was worried that I was going to get myself like too trapped in a little liberal land where I thought everything was okay.
Yeah, well, that is the danger. I think it's dangerous
Yeah.
to don't get your news from it. Or like one thing that one of my friends does is he's got a list called twats or something, and you just
Right.
follow loads of people that you hate and put them on a specific list.
Yeah.
and then whenever you want to see what the world looks like from another perspective, you can go and have a little peek, because and also it messes up the algorithm, so your news doesn't get too skewed, I think, as well.
That's it, yeah, and if things are going to get really scary politically, I kind of want to confuse the people who might black bag me, like
Absolutely.
when
Yeah,
McCarthyism comes
want
back.
to throw them off a little bit. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, if you looking at my Twitter last night, I was like, well, I mean, by the looks of this Twitter, Jeremy Corbyn's in for an absolute landslide. I don't think anyone's voting for Theresa May.
yeah,
It's really
absolutely.
dangerous getting your perspective from social media.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, like having followed the Tories, I now like click and look at all of their replies, and they do tend to be very angry, whereas the Labour replies tend to be quite nice. I don't know what's
Well,
going on there.
I think the left tends to be funnier, even when we're cross. Well, that's whenever I have arguments with my dad about left and right, 'cause he's quite Tory. You
Right.
know, the things that we've got music and comedy on our side. There are no funny right-wing comedians. There are
No,
no
not
really
really.
good right-wing bands, and I love that. And we've always got that. They can steal everything else, but we get to keep the good parties.
Yeah, the left is the creative wing, isn't it? Yeah, always has been.
Thank God, yeah. Well, we sort of have to be because they're not
Yeah.
leaving us with much else by the looks of things.
No, no. I mean, like, I was very much brought up in that world because having brought up Billy Bragg earlier, my dad was the world's only Billy Bragg tribute artist. So
Really?
yeah. So
Wonderful.
I was brought up in a complete socialist haven.
That's great.
So it
It's a
always,
wonder that you didn't. You could have rebelled very easily. You could have ended up a young conservative or something, couldn't you? Just
that's
like, screw
true.
you, Dad. I'm going to join the Tories.
I'm far too bad with money for that
Yeah.
problem. Socialism works for me.
Yeah, no, same actually. It works on so many levels, doesn't it? The creative side, the bit sort of being slightly disorganised but well-meaning. It just ticks all of the boxes for
It
people like
does,
us.
yeah. And bollocks, I've just realised that one of the rules I set for my website was to say we're not allowed to get political. I don't want to.
Oh, right.
No, it's
Okay, we just
okay. I'm not
cut
gonna.
all of that out. Cut it all out. Edit it out. I don't mind if it's a bit
No,
short.
no,
All
no.
that.
There's no way I'm editing it out because it's cool. But besides, I kind of like mistakes like this. I think he was talking about it earlier. The little mistakes. It's a part of like British life that we're not perfect, and that's what we should be proud of. And I kind of
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I enjoy it when things go south a little bit on the podcast, or I make some kind of a mistake with my website. So that's kind of fun. It shows that we're
Yeah,
fallible.
yeah, and also those are the things that people remember. And I remember hearing that I remember years and years ago, some comedian talking about it, long before I was ever performing. That the little local things, the bits you improvise, or the things that go wrong, they're the things that people remember out of a show. I remember like the first comedian I ever saw was Lenny Henry in like 1990, and I was like, wow, I'm seeing a comedian. And I don't really remember much of it, but I remember that a few jokes he made at the beginning that he improvised about how shit Ipswich was,
Right,
where I
yeah,
lived.
yeah.
And that stayed with me for always. I do remember the fact that I remember it now is ridiculous. And that's definitely something that I'd like to play with on stage as well. Even just if I'm doing a straightforward hip hop gig, got to find some stuff that will never be happening in any other gig. Some stuff that's specific to the place, or a freestyle about something, or something that goes horribly wrong. That's the stuff that people remember, I reckon.
This is perfect because you basically keep leading into questions that I'd already written down. So
That's
you're
handy,
nice
isn't
and
it?
yeah.
You're a great team.
Because I was going to ask. I've never had the fortune to see you live, so I was interested in like how it went down, what I could expect from a gig.
God knows. It varies. Like I did a gig at the weekend, and it was a big family festival, and I got all the children up at the end, and we all did a silly dance, and then we did a massive conga with me leading
Right.
all these kids around the audience. And afterwards, the guy who organised it said, "Oh, I also do like a few other festivals and comedy festivals." I'm like, "Oh, I do comedy. I'd love to do another comedy festival." It's like, "Well, it's not really a kids' comedy festival." And I'm like, "Oh no, that was just the kids' show. I've got a grown-up one as well. Honestly,
Yeah,
I've got
yeah.
all sorts of variations." And I started shouting, "I normally do loads of hard left comedy," and he just looked at me like, "I don't want that either. I don't. Please leave me be." Both those things I don't. But yeah, it varies depending on where I am. Like I do a lot of somebody's gig at a wedding will be a lot nicer than one I do at a fetish night or a dirty festival at dawn or something like that.
Right.
But it's normally a strange mix of mostly party hip hop, lots of freestyling, lots of talking to audience members and improvising around that.
Yeah.
And of late, what I've tried to do is trying to find ways to get people on stage and get them to do stuff, but without making them hate it and feel like a dick.
That's actually a good
without
point.
humiliating people, it's really hard, but that's what I aim to do.
Well, how do you manage that then?
There's a few different things. Like at the moment, I'm doing a thing where I go into the audience and I get a person to choose someone that they think is awesome, and then I go and talk to that person. I find out what about their life, and then I turn all of that into this massive introduction about how incredible this person is who might do something really mundane or whatever it might be, and just make it as big and huge as possible so they get this huge cheer and round of applause and all that kind of stuff, and then it kicks into that Celebrate song that's at the end of ApeQuest. So things like that where I could get a bit of comedy out of it, but not when I first started I was putting sort of masks on people and making them dance for me like some kind of drunken emperor.
Right.
Suddenly realised I wouldn't want that to happen to me, and I didn't want it to happen to anybody else. No one wants to go to a show and feel humiliated or feel like they've been made a joke of.
True. Are you quite a meek and socially anxious guy behind Professor Elemental then, do you think?
Not really. I get a bit. If I'm socially anxious at all, it tends to be that I get a bit overexcited, and I'll kind of. Is that kind of anxiety, the sort of nervous excitement that comes with sort of telling really inappropriate stories or talking a bit too loudly and a bit too quickly, that kind of stuff. But I'm always up for meeting new people. There's not a kind of sort of secret shyness that goes along with it. That's the nicest. One of the nicest things about it, and from travelling around doing music, is just at the age where I've got kids and I should be sort of not allowed out of the house. My job is to go and hang out with some random strangers and have parties all the time.
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah. It's quite a strange life.
It's great, isn't it? When you sort of turn around and go, how the hell did I end up in this castle on the other end of the city?
No, sorry, what was you going to say?
I was going to say, what's the weirdest gig you've ever done? What's your strangest one?
Well, you see, now, I'm not going to impress because it sounds like, you've dipped into the strange burlesque side of steampunk and all of that.
That's true, but it's all everything's relative. It's not like you have to, it's not like you have to play naked underwater or something. But I'm just curious because every musician, even if it wasn't like weird, but like just from a personal point of view, or just one that went really badly wrong or awry or something, I'm always fascinated.
Okay, in terms of badly wrong, I can tell a good one in that my wedding band played a New Year gig at somewhere we had a pretty successful residency at, and. It turned out that it was just so bad that 3 people came to this one particular night. That's usually a really booming and impressive night.
And it was New Year's Eve as well.
Yeah, New Year's Eve. Three people, 2 of which were elderly, and told us into our 3rd song to please be quieter.
That's wonderful.
And and we ended up finishing after something like 6 songs, and it was just the easiest payday of my life, that one.
So the best. Sometimes the worst gigs can still end up being a really good night as well. Kind of like, well, that was six songs. Then we get pissed. New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. But now you mention it, that's very British. That we kind of got very politely booed off stage by an old woman.
Yeah.
And actually, the funny thing is that in the other room, because there was another room, was one of these old school, like in his 70s cabaret type acts, performing to a full room of teenagers who were absolutely not bothered and wanted a band. And it's like, what's gone on here then?
How did you end up over there?
Yeah, exactly. So that was confusing and a bit embarrassing, but no.
You never know what you're going to get. I suppose doing weddings can be so. On the upside, I suppose you're not. It's not like you've got to worry about getting the numbers through the doors and that kind of stuff. But on the downside, weddings can be so varied, can't they? They can be really lovely and quite an honour to be there, or fucking hell, I want to get out of here as soon as possible.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You just never know.
You get the brides who are meticulous about absolutely everything, despite the fact that they've already set it up with you in the emails. Now I'm just complaining about my job. What the hell kind of a podcast is this?
Well, no, I asked you. I'm curious.
No, true, but get a British guy complaining. That's not a good idea.
Yeah, get us started and we'll run forever. That's for true.
I could fill up the time about awkward brides, and that's probably a bit of a waste.
Yeah, maybe.
But then again,
I've definitely done a couple of weddings where I've thought afterwards, yeah, you guys aren't going to be together very long.
That's actually, that's interesting.
Just completely different reasons. I've just thought, no, that's not a good fit. You don't belong.
Have you ever seen it clearly when there's a thing between the bride and the best man?
No, I don't know. I'm not normally there long enough to see that. But that must come up, mustn't it? You must have seen that.
I actually haven't, but I always have my eye open for it. I don't know if that's more telling of who I am.
Yeah, maybe it's your distrustful, non-romantic nature. That's what that is.
I just want to see everything collapse. I think that's pretty British as well. I don't know if that comes from the collapse of the empire, so now we're bitter. We want to see everything else collapse.
Yeah, we love failure, don't we? There's no other country where if someone drops a glass in a pub, like in Spain, they don't go "Woo!" when someone drops a tray or something, do they?
True.
Only Britain. We love failure, and we love it when things go. We love it when things go wrong as well. Don't we? We love the underdog.
And you bringing up Blackadder earlier, what happens at the end of every episode is Blackadder gets completely fucked over, and in a way that feels to us as viewers somehow validating. It feels right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the conceits for our little Professor radio show is for these first few episodes to start with, he's trying to get into a gentleman's club. And he tries his very, very best, and he obviously always fails and comes unstuck, usually because of his own hubris and ambition, which he can't possibly achieve. But there is something I didn't think about it at the time. There is something quite Blackadder-ish about that, and the fact that every single one ends with him failing. I think the big difference is he doesn't care that he's failed. He's like, well, never mind, we'll just do the same thing again tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas Blackadder's a bit more like pissed off with the situation. The professor stays optimistic no matter what happens. He's always like, well, I best of this thing on fire. How bad could it be? And I quite like having that as a little twist on the sort of normal archetype of failing aristocrats that we have.
Yeah, and a great example of that is that for the first time I actually discovered the little secret bit at the end of ApeQuest last night, where if I remember rightly, isn't it the time travel trousers stay stuck on, and they do the whole 2001 Daisy thing, while you're just like frustrated with the whole thing, like, okay, yeah, get the bloody fly down then. And it's just, and it's that twist on things that's so British. I'm not really hearing it too many places anymore. I don't know if that's because I'm closeted.
Interesting, actually. Well, there's not a lot of comedy in Britain at the moment. That's really, I'm finding that amazing. I think the last good thing I saw was This Country and Camping were the last two good programs I saw. And actually This Country, have you watched that?
No, is that what you brought up earlier?
No, it's a different thing actually. It was on BBC Three, and it's amazing. It's done in that Office style, as if it's a sort of pseudo documentary, which can be a bit tired. But it's based in a small village in the West Country, and it's just two teenagers with nothing to do. And again, it's beautifully. It's lovely because that's what again Britain does really well. That's why Red Dwarf was so good when it started. Like the comedy of boredom, I just find really, really funny when there's just comedy about nothing in particular. There's nothing going on. Well, Louis C.K.'s show is good with that as well. It's just comedy about just the great big sighs in life.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard a lot about that Louis show, but I haven't dipped my toe yet. I feel kind of bad about that one.
Oh, mate, you'll love it. But particularly, again, if you're a bit of a comedy nerd, it takes... Just skip the first couple of episodes because we've got Ricky Gervais in, and they're enough to put you off and go, this is just awful. But once it hits its stride, it becomes a really fascinating meditation on what it's like to be a middle-aged man, and a lot about what makes good comedy as well, what works in comedy and what doesn't.
I saw this. Well, one of the guys who I interviewed was this video editor for Super Deluxe in America called Dominic Nero, and he actually did an edit of Louie where he turned it into a silent movie and completely took off all of the dialogue and all of the audio and everything. And I saw that, and it was amazing to me how much it still worked as a silent comedy. I don't know if you thought about that kind of thing.
I bet that's a great, yeah, I bet that'd be wonderful to see. Well, that was always one. I'm a bit of a cartoon nerd as well, and that's always one of the rules of a good cartoon is one where you can turn the sound down and it's still funny. And I think
Yeah,
that's probably the same with a lot of good comedy as well.
yeah, you're right. And I don't know. I was just intrigued in that as somebody who's seen the show, like whether that comes across or not, like just how much it works on that many levels.
I think so. I think different episode. Yeah, it probably you would be able to follow it without any kind of audio at all. But at the same time, it's got some really funny, dour dialogue as well. Particularly
Oh,
once
of
you get to
course.
know the characters in detail. Yeah, I think you'll have a really good time with that. I devoured each season is slightly different, and it's really
Right.
worth consuming. It's great.
Well,
But where's the good British comedy? There's not much, is there? What was the last good thing you saw that was really like, oh man, that was everything it should be?
well, to be fair, Inside Number Nine, but that's like just about it in recent like decade or so.
It's not much, is there?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no.
it's scary. Even radio comedy, like Radio 4, used to be the home of just this all the innovative, even stuff like the League of Gentlemen and the Day to Day. They all came from Radio 4, and most of the Radio 4 comedy these days is just
Yeah.
really dull. It really
Um,
bothers me.
well, speaking of that, Stuart Lee's been on fire actually.
Yeah,
Apparently,
actually, Stuart Lee's program was really good. Oh, and Beef and Dairy Network, I think, is on Radio 4 now. Have you heard that?
no, I haven't. No.
Oh, I recommend that to anybody listening to this. It's a podcast. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts, but it's as good as the Day to Day or Brass Eye or anything like that. It's a very very gentle, very surreal, strange comedy, and it's a lot of different stand-up comedians guest starring in it. They're only about 15 minutes long, and it's awesome. Yeah, the Beef and Dairy Network, well
Well,
worth your while.
that definitely interests me because I'm a massive Chris Morris fan, so anything in that kind of vein is always going to get me.
Yeah. I always wonder why. It always feels a bit of a shame that Chris Morris didn't do something else, doesn't it? Doesn't matter
Yeah,
what, but I just want when he popped up on Stuart Lee at the end, you're like, oh yeah, Chris Morris. What an absolute hero he is, and I wish he was doing more writing or directing.
yeah, I think it's too comfortable. I don't know because
Yeah,
he needs to be angry.
well, it's like same happens to a lot of rappers, doesn't it? Going back to the hip hop thing,
That's
a lot of
true.
angry rappers turn shit. I mean, look at somebody like Ice Cube. He was great when he was all cross with white people. As soon as
Yeah.
he started appearing in family comedies, he just was terrible.
Well, that's interesting then, actually, that there's barely any anger in Professor Elemental.
Well, hopefully that'll be the secret to my longevity. I will actually probably do the opposite, and I'll start out really happy, but as I get older and more frustrated with the world, he'll
Actually,
probably he'll become really bitter and angry and
I
just
can
turn into
imagine that.
this fiery old man.
Yeah, a cranky older Elemental.
The old bastard.
The longer he's been in modern times.
The more miserable it makes him. Oh
Yeah,
God, that's a bleak outlook, isn't it?
yeah.
I think one of the things I want to do to him next is I want to test the optimism, and I want to do maybe a concept album or something where I just am horrible to him. Like I strip away everything. I take his mansion, I kill his monkey, just
You can't
like
kill
steal his
Jeffrey.
hat. And see, well, I won't kill him, but maybe the appearance of him being dead. Just see what would happen if you really like the ground Professor Elemental into the dirt. See
Yeah,
whether it
yeah.
comes. That might be quite good fun. I don't know.
Because
Poor Professor.
if you're gonna really start expanding the universe and like bringing in all of these extra characters, you don't want to go Game of Thrones on it just yet and start killing everyone.
God no, I don't think I could actually kill anyone. I might pretend to kill somebody in a sort of comicsy way, like like they always do in the comics. They're always killing Batman and bringing him back 10 minutes later,
Yeah,
like that
that's
sort of
true.
thing.
With a Lazarus pit or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and again, that's kind of dovetailed into something because I'm a pretty huge comics nerd as well myself, so I thought we could touch on comics for a little bit.
We totally need to get drunk at some point. That's pretty much everything, isn't it?
Well, to be fair,
Comics, hip hop, comedy.
this is it. Like the more and more I was doing research in preparation for this and going through absolutely everything on your site because I try to be as like as complete as possible when I talk to somebody, because I hate being caught off guard.
That makes such a nice change as well, because you don't always have that with podcasts, so it's
Yeah.
appreciated.
Well, actually, as well, that's something that a lot of my guests have said. So I thought, well, I might as well keep that up, because if it's not really going on,
Yeah.
then you know it's pretty good. But no, I don't want to start sucking off my own podcast. Probably cut that
You won't
off.
have to do that every so often. But I've definitely done the odd podcast where they go, "So you do rapping?
Well,
Do
this
you,
is
do you, are
it.
you going to keep doing rapping?" And for fuck's sake.
I'm not gonna mention what it was, but one of the interviews that I did see with you, the first question I think was, so what is chap hop?
Yeah, that's pretty much the first question at every podcast I've ever
Yeah,
done.
and it's like, okay. I mean, like, I always try to
Okay.
record like a little 2 or 3 minute like intro anyway, so anyone who isn't up to speed gets up to speed.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't,
Absolutely.
I would have hated to have done the whole. So what do you do? Tell me, give me the whole
Well, I
lowdown.
do. I sometimes I don't. Yeah, you never mind doing it because you appreciate. I also appreciate that I'm like a niche within a niche.
Oh
Like a
yeah,
Goldilocks,
totally.
for example, they're pretty niche, but I'm like, I'm beyond a niche really. I'm in a genre where there's only two people doing it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I mean, the chances are is that like you and Mr. B, um, both so good at it, and you've got the rivalry that's gone on, and then the making up and all of that. It's almost like, well, for me as a musician, I wouldn't want to step in that territory. You know what I mean? That's probably why it's so small.
Yeah, I think it's, and also we've kind of got it. We've got it so covered, haven't we? Like, what else are you going to talk about? Even us just doing it, the two of us, we've like branched out, and he's done his sort of Acid Edward kind of strange dubstep stuff,
Right,
and
right.
um, and I've come into the modern times and things. So yeah, I think it's definitely the whole idea of it being chat pop was a lovely springboard when we were first doing tea songs or fighting trousers. But in an idea, I'm not going to moan about having a label I don't like, but in an ideal world, I'd love it to be just seen as silly hip hop again. Because the chat pop thing sort of, I just like, makes my teeth itch a bit.
I know
I
what
think
you
if
mean.
someone told me about it, if I wasn't doing it and someone said, "Oh, have you heard of chat pop?" I'd be like, "Oh man, that sounds awful."
Yeah, because I
I
mean,
want it to be really good music. I want it to be really nice. I want people to like it.
exactly, because I also listen to all the just purely elemental stuff with Mr. Simmons and the Rebel Without Applause,
Yes.
and it is just great hip hop actually, and in a way it is a shame that Professor Elemental steamrolled over that because it's great, the Professor Elemental stuff, but I feel like that stuff deserves as much attention.
Oh, that's very nice of you to say. Well, truth be told, like if not for the professor, that stuff wouldn't have even had half of the attention that it has had, even on a sort of small level. Because I was doing elemental stuff for years before I did the professor, and there's a lot of independent UK rappers who some of them are amazing, but like don't necessarily get heard.
Yeah.
Unless they've got some kind of novelty thing to link them in. So I never really mind too much that the professor's taken over because it's allowed. I mean, it's taken me around the world, and the fact that we're sat here talking now and I'm not in a call center somewhere like I used to be
Yeah, true.
crying. I can never really complain about it. I probably love it.
You are probably one of the most humblest, well, easily the humblest guest we've had on, because I did want to talk about your enthusiasm because it did take me back because I have had in the past a little bit of an attitude of, oh, podcasts, I'm going to have to do that for publicity. Um, but you were always really excited and like totally ready to come on and up for
Because
it.
I'm so lonely. Because I
Oh,
work on my own. I work on my own all day in a weird little office surrounded by muppets, doing admin and making up spreadsheets. Oh yeah, podcast. Let's chat about hip hop for now. That'd be nice.
well, yeah, man, totally. But I mean, it's not just that. Because I doubt you'll remember this because it was so long ago, and I think it was only one message. But we've actually been in touch before, like well back in like 2009 or something, I think. Because Benjamin, who also runs Secret Cave with me, used to do his own hip hop stuff under the name of Rough Drafts, and
Oh
you actually offered us a slot at opening for you, and it's always been like amazing to me just how up for things you are. And you talked about the
yeah.
collaboration earlier.
Well, it works both ways, doesn't it? In collaborations, I do think, apart from the fact that it's a nicer, more fun way to go about things, because you might as well approach everything with enthusiasm and say yes to stuff and see what works afterwards. But there is, even from a purely selfish point of view, like you never know where collaborations going to end. I've done some things that really have been a massive waste of time, or I've enjoyed them and they've gone nowhere, or I've enjoyed them and they've turned out and been absolutely fairly shit. So there's definitely a handful of projects I've kind of kept. They came out, but then I put them back down quite quickly because they weren't all that great. But in amongst it, you sometimes end up with Tom Caruana, who produces all the music, or doing a video, that first video I did with Moog, if I hadn't done Cup of Brown Joy with him, there wouldn't be any kind of Professor career. He'd be performing for 10 people, upstairs in a pub somewhere. So, and even now there's a couple of acts that I've had support me, and I've said, oh yeah, come and do a support slot. And while they've been doing my support slot, I've been thinking, yeah, I definitely need to stay friends with you, because when nobody likes me, you're going to be really big. I'm going to be picking you for the support slot. When I'm old and no one cares anymore, and you're doing really well because you're clearly amazing, I would be desperate for a support slot from you. So it's, I think that all those things, it's very positive and nice. But I only collaborate with people who I want to hang out with. That's one of my definite rules. I only really ever do stuff with people who I personally would want to spend time with.
Yeah, it does get a little bit awkward. I've been in bands that, personally, you really don't rub up well with certain people, and it's not good.
It's not like, no about yourself, but I make a nice enough living out of this, but probably about the same amount as I would have done if I'd stayed teaching.
Right.
Like, a normal person's salary. I'm not struggling for money, but I'm not rolling in it. We just about get by on it. And we're not making enough money to do stuff for with people that we hate. We might as well be. That's one of the benefits of making music and doing creative stuff for a living, is you get to hang out with nice, interesting people.
I didn't know you had a background in teaching.
Yeah, it's what I did before doing this, and there was a weird couple of years, 2008, 2009, where I was doing the Professor, and it was going quite well, but I was still teaching full time, and I just became a worse and worse teacher until I eventually got up because I was being really shit.
Yeah. Was it English in secondary school, I'd imagine?
No, it was special needs. It was teenagers in a special
school.
Oh,
okay, yeah, fair enough.
And I bloody loved it. It was, if this stopped tomorrow, I would be straight back doing that sort of stuff, because special needs is just the best, most beautiful world to spend your time in.
I can imagine it's incredibly rewarding. Yeah.
It is, but it's also really hilarious as well. That's what I liked about it. There's a certain amount of anarchy, again, that you get if you're hanging out with 16 people with quite profound learning difficulties. They're going to get up to some kind of mischief, and they're going to do things that aren't really acceptable.
Right.
Obviously, part of your job is to try and rein that in and make sure everyone's having a nice time and no one's offended. But it's really unpredictable, and that's sort of it keeps you really alive and vibrant. That anything can happen at any time, and people's behaviour can sort of just erupt in all kinds of weird ways. And you actually you end up learning quite a lot from people as well, because most of the people I knew with Down syndrome or autism, there's no racism or bullying, or they're not horrible to anybody, or they don't go on Twitter and start trolling people like that's. So it's a nice world to hang out in, definitely.
Right, and do you still do the workshops as well?
Yeah, I do. I did one on Sunday, actually, at a festival. That was nice. Not so many now, and I'm all right with that, because when I was, say, like 29, 30, doing workshops, I could name most of the hip-hop MCs that people knew about. But now, you don't really want to put me in front of a group of teenagers, because they're all listening to grime. So no one's doing 4/4 old school, what they would consider really old school kind of rap patterns.
I feel what you mean.
Yeah, I'm all right with. I feel like I'm almost a little bit too old to be doing those kind of workshops. I can still do them with younger kids and festivals and stuff, but like proper. I used to do lots of teenagers with behavioural difficulties, and I'm just aware that now, if you take off the elemental armour, I basically just look like somebody's dad.
Yeah, right. Okay, I can understand that. Yeah, and you've always, well, at least from what I've seen, had a bit of a toe dipped in charity. You brought it up earlier with the song about name dropping Britain First and all of that, and all the proceeds going, and then these workshops. I mean, although I'm sure you're getting paid for them. I still consider it a pretty charitable thing to do, because I certainly couldn't do it, even if I was some kind of successful rapper. I don't think I could do it.
Well, I suppose it's having done the teaching stuff, it comes a little bit more naturally. And I think, particularly being a rapper, because you are, I mean, teaching special needs and rapping in front of a audience at Boomtown say pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Shouting at loads of people who are all a bit random and not necessarily listening to you. So
But yeah,
it comes quite naturally.
it is probably my own experiences in that. Like, I trained to be a teacher myself, but I very quickly dropped out because that is one hell of a scary world.
It's terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they get so much respect for people who stick it out as well. You know, not because of the teaching kids stuff, but all of the stuff. I'm not going to veer too hard into politics, but all of the stuff that goes with teaching is next to impossible to do. Like, when I did it, you know, you can only do it if you have nothing else going on in your life.
Oh yeah,
if you do
absolutely.
every moment of your day to teaching, you can teach. But if you do anything else, then you've got no chance.
I feel like a lot of people aren't like, because I only really like flirted with the whole teaching thing for about 3 months. I trained in Lancaster, but I feel like if unless you've kind of been in the staff room for any amount of time, you're not aware of how fucking difficult it is to be a teacher in Britain.
So tough, isn't it?
Yeah,
And, you
yeah.
know, I had it easy as well. Like, there's a lot less paperwork with special needs teaching, and you know, it was a very, very nice sort of school where they just let you get on with it. Like, God knows what it'd be like to be a teenager teaching what it'd be like to teach teenagers science or something like that. No,
Absolutely.
it's one of those, isn't it? We're very lucky to be doing what we're doing, sitting around drinking tea, playing guitars, rapping, and talking on podcasts.
Oh, to be fair, I'll get carpal tunnel syndrome if I keep typing the way I do, so I can complain about that.
Yeah, there's always something to complain about. Of
Yeah,
course, you don't
exactly.
understand too, Johnny. That's just not right. But I'm afraid to say that I'm going to have to go because I've got to go and do. I won't say boring things. I've got to go and do house stuff.
Yeah, no
And
problem. I didn't actually ask how long you had free, so that's my fault. Sorry about that.
no, not at all. I've really enjoyed. Whereabouts are you based?
I'm actually in Grimsby, funnily enough.
Grimsby. I've never done a gig in Grimsby. I went to university in Hull at Humberside Uni.
Oh,
The
right.
only one that took me. And yeah, we went to Grimsby on a really funny weekend once.
Oh, yeah, you can have fun here.
Get us a gig in Grimsby, and then we can get pissed.
Oh, I can absolutely get you a gig, man. I'll email you.
Yeah, do definitely. We can, yeah, we can get something together and use it as an excuse to hang out and talk about comics and good comedy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure there's much more to be said, but thanks so much for coming on, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's been a real pleasure, honestly. It's been like having a mate over for a cup of tea. So, yeah, thanks very much for having us, and yeah, hopefully I'll see you soon.
Yeah, no problem. I'll be in touch.
Yeah, nice one. Cheers.
Bye for now.
See you soon. Bye.
Thank you again to Paul for coming on the show. Really, really friendly guest, and it was just a joy to speak to him. As I say, I really felt like I hit it off with him, and I'm really going to hope to get that gig going in my hometown. That should be a lot of fun. I might post some things up about that in case anyone in the north of England wants to come down and drop in. Anyway, I can give a little bit of a schedule for the first time because we do have some podcasts recorded and waiting to come out. So I can say that the next one is going to be with Dan Renton Skinner, who's best known for playing Angelos Epithemu on shows like Shooting Stars and the character of Bosch on House of Fools with Vic and Bob. He's going to be our next guest in about a week's time. And after that, we're going. Well, I've already spoken to Doug Lussenhop, also known as DJ Doug Pound, who was a real influential and huge part in giving Tim and Eric Awesome Show a great job. The aesthetic that it's got, he's just had a massive impact on the world of editing, and it was a joy to speak to him as well. As always, thank you very much for joining me on the show, and I'll see you next time. Bye for now.